to give my bit on Windows 7 finally, and also give a little bit on Snow Leopard. These are going to be the two new OSs coming respectively from Microsoft and Apple. I want this to be educational, and I have points on both from arguments that I hear that I would like to contribute to kind of put, I guess, a different perspective on things. I know a lot of you, like, this has been the biggest request to cover Windows 7, and many times I said, look, I don't have an opinion, it's beta, I really don't want to contribute an opinion, it's unfair, and it's unfair to compare a beta to other fully functional operating systems, so on and so forth. Having an open beta just like this alone, I think, is an extraordinarily positive direction in what Microsoft is doing. This is providing a buffer for the final release, and if they listen to a lot of the problems or positive comments that are coming from the users of the beta to contribute to the final release, then all the better OS that they can provide. So where should I really start? First of all, I will say this. I like what I'm seeing with Windows 7, just flat out. And I'm also going to say that when Microsoft has learned its lesson, this is not a revolutionary OS, it's an evolutionary OS. So one could say it is analogous to the progression of OS X, okay, in terms of incremental advancement. It is still very much a lot of Vista underneath, but there's so much underneath the hood of Windows 7 that they've really added to it, just like with Snow Leopard. So with that said, whether you're a Mac or Windows user, I really can't say that when one says, well, that's just a service pack, you know, that's not a real upgrade. In both cases are dead wrong. They have done a tremendous amount of work with both of these OSs from what I've learned in research. I spent a lot of time with the PDC, the whole development side of Windows, and asking questions, researching, reading, and all this other stuff to find the answers. And so that's why I can safely say I'm very pleased with where Microsoft is going with Windows 7. So I'll go over Windows 7, and then I'm going to go over Snow Leopard's technology as briefly and as simply as I can, because I do know that I lose people when it's too technical, and then I also get the very technical geeks that are saying, gosh, you know, you're boring the crap out of us with this general information. It's kind of hard to satisfy both sides. Windows 7, main things that I've researched and found out. Under the hood, they've done a lot of development for the kernel. They've done a lot of development in terms of threads, schedulers, syncing, fibers to the CPU, multi-core awareness, NUMA memory awareness. I would say probably better use of memory, just in terms of management, but that also has a lot to do with your chipset that you're going to buy. Compatibility is there. Service Control Center, user control, hooks into programming. Gosh, I hope I don't leave some important things out. They've done some improvements to their graphics API. The security has been updated a little bit. Their audio. They've really built upon Vista, and I know what everybody's, the Mac users are saying. Well, see, this is what Vista should have been. Let me correct that in saying, if Vista didn't exist, this operating system would have taken the beating. And this has to do with a lot of the choices Microsoft made in the past and where they took their OS. And I explained a lot of this within my Behind the Bit video. From going to DOS all the way up the scale to where we are now. Okay, so they had to, for where we are within the reality of what Windows was, they had, especially after the break of XP and the amount of exploits XP had, they added a tremendous amount of layers, added security, a whole lot of improvements to try to make the user experience better. But their legacy and backwards compatibility haunted them in doing that. So if Vista didn't exist, you would be hating Windows 7. So Vista had to be the whipping boy to be the buffer so that Microsoft could advance. There's just no way around it. I mean, this I personally don't see things that they could have really done. I mean, I don't know. Of course, we're not purview to all of the inner secrets of Microsoft, but from what I can observe, I think they did what they had to, and one of the advancements of the OS is going to have to take that brunt, especially with incompatibility with the security system, so on and so forth. So Windows 7 is I would say a major advancement from Vista within Taskbar to the kernel. It's just not to say the Taskbar, just the GUI in general. We can just say the GUI service scheduler. Now let me talk about, I guess, what I rattled off earlier. What they are doing, yeah, they made a lot of their features faster at boot by simply not activating certain services and processes. There's a bit of intelligence in there, although I would say intelligence has overhead after all in its use, but it's minimal. I can't agree with people who are going to say, well, it's lighter or a smaller footprint. It's not really supposed to be. That would probably come off as an insult in saying, well, look, this is an advancement from XP. You have a hell of a lot more intelligence within this system, especially for security and memory management and things, multi-core aware, NUMA aware, all these other things that are not in XP. What are you going to do? To shave that off and just say, okay, now it's a lighter system? Sure, we can go and debate what I was talking about behind the bit, but this is not what this video is about. This video is about the reality of where we are versus theoretically speaking where we could be. And for the reality, I think that Microsoft has done a very wise decision in what they're doing with Windows 7. Technically speaking, there's a lot of changes. Like I said, under the hood, without getting too geeky, that I think that are going to make the experience a pleasurable one on Windows 7. Before I lose track again, I'll go back to the things that I did study into, which was some of the Service Control Center, where they were talking about using less resources. That's a yes and no statement. If you don't have certain peripherals, let's say like tablet use, or you're just simply just not going to use XYZ service, they're not going to be on. Okay, so you're not going to use those services. Those resources will be available for other things in the computer. Versus Vista and XP, where I'm booting up, turn them on, I'm shutting off, turn them off, whether they're used or not. So if you do use it, they will activate, right? And so that means you will actually be using those resources and dependencies that those services, processes, whatever, require within Windows 7. So is it lighter and less resource intensive? It's a yes or no. It depends on how you use it. Which then goes into some of the people are saying, well, it doesn't come with these packages and things like that. Windows 7 is to me is a minimalistic base. I see it throughout their system in saying, if you want something, we'll give it to you. But here's the base foundation. Okay? We don't want to plague you with too much. So, if you need it, we'll turn it on. You don't need it, we're going to keep it off. And that's what I'm seeing just rampant through Windows 7. Some of you may just not like that, because I know their OS 10 comes with iLife and all these other things. Okay, that's fine. These two operating systems have two very different philosophies, and I'll get into that a little bit later. So, with that Service Control Center, very much a repeat of that. If you want it, it's going to go on. If you don't, it's going to go off. With some of the audio stuff that I found out, again, if you have the devices, some newer features will activate. If not, it won't. It's going to do as much as it can to behave to the way you use Windows 7. then rather than just here it all is for you. We don't care if you're not going to use it. The services are going to run, the dependencies are going to run, the processes are going to run, so on and so forth. The other thing that they did, because they did kernel changes in the kernel has to be more multi-core, multi-CPU aware, and then the whole memory thing. They wanted to still maintain compatibility and improve their driver base. Also, make several improvements in terms of programmers and writing, custom drivers, and access to proprietary use models that Windows 7 has in it that can be accessed, things like that. And they're doing the best they can for a flat out just flat out paying attention to compatibility. Vista is the buffer. So many people who have worked the kinks out of Vista, and the software developers that have had time to develop for Vista, will run on Windows 7. I haven't had an issue, except for ATI on my Crossfire, but I didn't find a driver for it yet for Windows 7. Anyway, so what does that mean? Basically, they have a user space kernel, and from what I understand, have the kernel level of threads going to the CPU, and then where a user level thread comes down, we'll find a corresponding kernel thread to go down, get the resource, and then go back up. They've also done improvements for fibers, which I know SQL Server was a heavy use, which is a custom way. It's a custom way of getting to a CPU resource, just to make it simple. For anything that I'm saying, if you want a detailed video on it, I'll be happy to make the video for that. I guess we can go into the taskbar, since that's such a heated thing. It's copying the doc and vice versa. Well, let's just suffice it to say this, a little bit of history. If you're going to say something at the bottom of the screen that launches something, is copying from one or the other, I do know that there was, and I'll put up some pictures here. You have Windows 1, which has, like at the bottom there, some icons that you could click, and I think it would launch a window. Then you would click again, and you would get your app. The Arthur OS, RISC OS, all having dock aesthetically like, not functional, but dock aesthetically like looking. But the reason why Windows 7's taskbar is not the dock is because they're two drastically different ideologies behind them and how they execute. Windows 7, the taskbar, has always been window instance driven. It drives Windows. In other words, it's like, here's a window and here's what we're going to put in it. Like, here's a window and there's Word inside that window. Just as simplistically saying it, okay? It's completely designed to do what? Manage Windows. That's it. And therefore its behavior is as such. And I mean, things like, and I'm not going to go into all of what it does. I just will say things like that I like. Yeah, this you can. I really suggest people go to the Windows 7 site and just watch their taskbar things. I really like the attention to detail, where they'll take the brightest or strongest pigment within the task bar button here, and it'll highlight across. It'll literally, the light will travel across. If you're downloading something, it'll give you the progress within the actual button. I think rather visually pleasing. Quick launch is not quick launch, guys. Look, the taskbar, from what I read in the PDC stuff, is technically 3 things, but the quick launch is no longer quick launch. It is all really one functional taskbar, where you have quick launch like function, but it is not quick launch. Okay, things why I'll talk about that. It's like if you do pin something right to the taskbar, which is really, again, Windows driven, even though it can launch an application. Like Internet Explorer, for instance, will pop up into the pin, and then all the rest of the windows will bleed out. I personally like this style. You can have large icons, small icons, all that good stuff. But again, basically, you can interact with these pop-ups right here. You can close it out, boom. And I do like how it just toggles like that, and you know, for whatever you have that's going to pop up, whatever it may be. I think it's just fantastic, and you can close it and interact with it. See, within Vista, that was just a visual. There was really no interaction with that pop-up, and it's kind of like bringing you know, the Alt-Tab feature down to the taskbar level. But you can interact with these things. They've simply done a good job with it. Anyway, so what is the dock? Because I've just said that the taskbar is Windows instance driven. The dock is application instance or file document driven. So where Windows says here we're providing you a window, the dock is saying I'm providing you an application or document. And usually the document is inherited to an application anyway. Those are two very different ways of thinking, and therefore that's why they have different behaviors. Now I know the debates will go on, hog heaven. Oh well, you know, the taskbar looks like the dock, so on and so forth. I don't think it looks anything like the dock, to be honest with you. Yeah, I guess if you use it in the small icons and all that, that's fine. Yeah, you would the icons in the bottom, but they do very drastically different things and have very different behaviors. I mean, in the dock, I just don't think it's fair to compare application driven versus window driven. That to me doesn't make sense to even get in those kinds of debates. If you wanted to debate beauty, that's another thing, and aesthetics is another thing. But those are the two very different ideologies. Now, so I guess to conclude with Windows 7, I think Microsoft has done a fantastic job. I do like Windows 7. I will wait for the final release to say, okay, this is the final verdict on it. But they have paid attention, and Microsoft has learned from the past. And I hope that they continue to be an evolutionary advancement rather than their past, and keep up the kind of improvements that they've made here. They may run into other kinds of bottlenecks just based upon the whole legacy that they need to bring in, but then as virtualization gets better, they could probably sidestep that. Snow Leopard. Snow Leopard is significant primarily because whereas Windows, and this is Windows 7 64-bit, OS X is not a full 64-bit operating system. It will be with Snow Leopard, and that is a significant advancement, and one that if Apple pulls off without a hitch, I think would just really be some serious bragging rights. And based upon past performance, I think they'll pull it off. They also with OpenCL, that's a significant advancement. Basically, general purpose computing on a GPU, or for the purposes of parallel computing, or tying that into Grand Central, and Grand Central saying these are all the available items which would represent a processing unit of some kind, whether it's GPU, CPU, are available as resources, and then I can execute whatever I need upon them as balanced as possible for the fastest result possible. OpenCL can work hand in hand with OpenGL. These are significant changes within Snow Leopard. 64-bit alone going full is drastic, and I'm sure people will just simply say it's still going to be a service pack, and people will still call Windows 7 Windows Vista, but I think that you're just ignoring the past and how these operating systems need to evolve. Windows Vista had to be there. There had to be a whipping boy. And OS X, since OS X is about really being all in one, whereas the 32-bit and 64-bit, they don't have a separate 64-bit system like Microsoft does. So they have to have all these technologies that have been discussed before with like linear address extension and so on and so forth. They're just two different ways of thinking, and therefore two different results that you have. And in many cases, sometimes it's just comparing apples and oranges in some of these debates that I see. in videos, and I just don't think it's fair at all to say Snow Leopard is a service pack and Windows 7 is Vista. So I hope I've covered enough. I can't go extensively into Snow Leopard because Apple obviously doesn't release a whole lot. I can go all day in OpenCL, but this would then turn into an OpenCL video, or into GPU, multi-core GPUs. But I have a multi-processing series already, which I will be doing a sequel to the first one, being able to add. And I've been holding off because I've been wanting to add Vista's multi-processing capabilities rather than talking about XP, because I have a lot of the internals information for prior Vista, and I'm waiting for the new information to get released for Windows newer operating systems to be very accurate to give to you guys. I mean, that's really what I want to do. That's really my purpose here. I'm not here to give propaganda, or I'm here to educate and do the best that I can to get everybody as technically informed as possible. If there's any other questions, something I forgot, because I'm sure I did, please response video, comment, what have you, and I'll make that video. Anyway.